Welcome to part 3 of our analysis of the 1978 My Book of Bible Stories, published by Jehovah's Witnesses. Today we'll examine how this children's book presents its religious messages and shapes young readers' understanding of these biblical narratives. Let's start with something really interesting about the title page. Have you ever noticed how some books present their stories as absolute truth? That's exactly what's happening here. Instead of saying, this is one way to understand these events, the book presents everything as straightforward historical fact. It's like telling kids, this is exactly how it happened, rather than leaving room for different interpretations. This sets up a particular way of thinking that carries through the rest of the book. The story of manna is particularly clever in how it connects with young readers. Think about it. Through simple questions and relatable examples, it builds a bridge of trust with children. But here's where it gets interesting. While teaching about this miraculous food from heaven, it's also introducing some pretty heavy concepts about following rules and what happens when you don't. It's like teaching a life lesson wrapped in a fascinating story. When we get to the tabernacle section, things get really visual. Imagine trying to explain complex religious ceremonies to a child. That's exactly what this book does, using detailed pictures and simple explanations. It's actually quite clever how it breaks down these elaborate religious practices into bite-sized pieces that children can understand, while also teaching them about the importance of religious leadership and following sacred traditions. The story of the 12 spies is a real turning point in the narrative. It's essentially a tale of two perspectives, those who trusted and those who doubted. What's fascinating is how the story presents these choices and their consequences. It's like a powerful object lesson about trust and doubt, though it definitely leaves a strong impression on young readers about questioning authority. Now let's talk about the Jordan River crossing. What an incredible story. The book presents this miraculous event with such certainty that it's bound to capture any child's imagination. But here's what's interesting. There's no discussion about natural explanations or scientific possibilities. It's presented as pure miracle, which really shapes how children might think about similar extraordinary claims they encounter later in life. The fall of Jericho brings us to one of the more challenging stories to present to children. Think about it. How do you tell kids about walls falling down and a city being conquered while keeping things age-appropriate? The book manages this by focusing on divine authority and obedience, though this approach raises interesting questions about how children learn to process complex moral situations. The story of Achan really drives home the book's message about following rules. It's presented almost like a cautionary tale, showing what happens when someone breaks divine law, even in what might seem like a small way. It's quite powerful how this story demonstrates consequences, though it might leave quite an impression on young readers about making mistakes. The Gibeonite story is fascinating because it deals with deception, something every child can relate to. The book takes this complex situation and simplifies it into clear rights and wrongs. While this makes it easier for children to understand, it also shows how the book handles nuanced moral situations in very straightforward terms. Here's something really interesting. The story about the sun standing still. Now, this is where science and faith really intersect. The book presents this incredible event simply as fact, which really shows us how supernatural elements are handled. It's particularly fascinating to think about how children process this kind of information as they learn more about astronomy and physics. Rahab's story brings us to another complex moral situation. It's amazing how the book manages to take this complicated tale about loyalty, deception, and faith, and present it in a way children can grasp. The focus stays firmly on the importance of choosing God's side, though it does raise interesting questions about how children learn to navigate complex ethical choices. When we look at Deborah's story, we see something really interesting about how leadership roles are presented. Here's a powerful female leader, but notice how carefully her story is told. It's fascinating to see how the book balances showing strong female leadership while still maintaining certain traditional viewpoints of about gender roles in religious authority. Let's look at the story of Ruth, which really drives home the importance of loyalty and submission. The book presents these as the highest virtues a person can have, which sends a powerful message to children about what makes someone good. This shapes how young readers might think about their own relationships and when it's okay to say no to others. Moving on to Gideon's story, we see how the book uses miraculous signs to teach children about trusting authority without question. It's interesting how the story keeps reinforcing this idea that following leadership blindly is the right thing to do. This kind of message can really stick with kids as they grow up and face decisions about who to trust and follow. The story of Jephthah tackles some really tough moral questions, especially for a children's book. When it talks about promises and sacrifice, it presents some pretty heavy concepts to young readers. Think about how this might shape a child's understanding of promises and what they're expected to give up for their beliefs. In Samson's story, we see a clear message. Physical strength comes from God and stays only as long as you follow the rules. It's fascinating how the book connects being strong with being obedient. This sends children a clear message about success and failure, that everything good in their lives depends on how well they follow religious rules. Samuel's story shows us how the book promotes the idea of dedicating children to religious service from an early age. It's presented as this wonderful, ideal thing. But let's think about what this means for young readers who are trying to figure out their own path in life and their personal relationship with faith. Looking at all these stories together, we can see some clear patterns emerging. There's this consistent use of fear, this emphasis on absolute obedience, and these subtle ways of shaping how children think. These aren't just stories. They're powerful tools that can shape how young minds develop and how children learn to think for themselves. Here's the thing. We need to be really careful about how we present religious ideas to children. Yes, religious education can be valuable, but it needs to be done in a way that respects where children are in their development. Instead of using fear to enforce compliance, we should focus on helping children understand and explore their faith in healthy, age-appropriate ways.